Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fright Fest. Today is our first episode of Macabre Monday, and we are talking about none other but the Plainfield Butcher himself. That's right, Edward Gien. Now, to get started, if you don't know, Edward Gien is actually the influence of many stories, probably the influence of majority of slasher films, but is in direct relationship to the movies Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs. Edward Gien grew up in a town in Wisconsin. His father, George, his mother, Augusta. Augusta was like a wicked big holy roller, and she was all about preaching about the devil, and her boys weren't allowed to talk to women, and this and that. And his father was kind of a drunken bum who took on a lot of different jobs and never really had like a set career. But Augusta would always patronize him and give him shit because, well, he was a drunk. And they had 2 kids to take care of. And those 2 kids are actually being Henry and Ed Gien himself. Now, his father had died at some point in 46 of a heart failure due to actual complications from alcoholism. And this alleged, let's go back a little bit. See, what happened is Augusta was kind of tired of dealing with George, that's Ed Gein's father. So she forced him to sell a little convenience store that they had and moved out to Plainfield onto a 155-acre piece of land. Now, she did this, and she kept the boys in seclusion and trying to keep her father in the wraps, probably thinking if they're out in the middle of the country, he can't be out all night drinking, right? Well, apparently she was really wrong, because it just ended up getting worse and eventually leading to his heart disease caused by alcoholism. Now, Augusta used to keep George and Henry and Edward under her thumb, always preaching that alcohol was bad and that women were the instrument of the devil and that they were all whores, except for her, of course. But I think this kind of is what left Ed Gien to kind of be, so drawn and hateful towards women. Not to mention, his father was actually a tanner, and Ed used to help his father with that. So I think he still had that kind of like skinning animals thing, and we'll get at that pretty soon. I'll have some pictures for you as well of Ed's DIY craft work, which is unbelievably insane. But anyway, so Edward Gien started when one day Ed's brother was going to actually move out on Ed, and Ed needed help kind of burning some brush and stuff like that. Well, the fire had actually gotten so out of control that it actually caused all the fire departments to come out and help them put out the fire. When they had asked where Henry was, Ed didn't know that he stated. So they started a search party. They all came out. They had lanterns and, flashlights and people all over the place searching for Henry, and they finally found him too. You know what he was? He was face down. Not a burn on him. So what happened? Well, the city didn't bother to do nothing about it because they didn't even do an autopsy. They just deemed it heart failure caused by asphyxiation. But then it was later discovered that Henry had bruising on his head. So what could have happened? Well, some would say that Ed decided to kill his own brother, but Ed would never admit to this. Ed only got up to 2 murders, one being Beatrice Warden, who was his final victim. And basically what happened with her was her son was the sheriff of Plainfield, Illinois. Go figure. So, anyway, just so I'm not going too far. Augusta had actually died in 45 and she was 67, which left Ed alone. He didn't have no family, no friends. Now his father, his brother, his mother, all dead. And he's the awkward guy in town. So he would work later as a handyman, and he'd get, farm money and stuff like that when his crops weren't doing too good. And anyway, what finally led to his arrest was when he went to a Plainfield hardware store known as Warden's. Okay? And the cops were looking for Bernice Warden everywhere. Her son was a sheriff. He showed up. People were like, yeah, we've seen the truck, but it's out of here now. Well, that didn't make any sense because there was blood. The cash register was open, and there was blood on the floor as well. So anyway, at going through paperwork and looking through things, the last receipt that he had actually made, and this is what caught up with old Eddie, okay, was a receipt, and his name was the last thing in the whole day. So they go out to the farm. They found Patrice's body hung upside down and gutted open, and she was bleeding out, kind of like how you would, bleed out a deer carcass. Well, her head was also missing, by the way. So the cops go and they're like, hey, we need backup out here. This place is crazy, right? So when the cops finally show up, they're going through the house and they find boxes of noses, women's genitalia everywhere, ears, eyes. There was over 9 corpses that were decapitated and skinned. And that's not even the start of it. And I will warn you that these pictures here are of very graphic nature. Now, Ed was he was not a murderer. He was a murderer, but he wasn't a serial killer like Gacy, the Green River Killer, or Dahmer, or Bundy even. He killed 2 people, but the extremeness of his crimes at the time that they were committed, it was unheard of. It was unthought of. They walked into a house of Macbre, no pun intended, but they found lamps made of spine with human skin. They found high-heeled shoes with an eyeball on the heel. I mean, he made purses. He reupholstered furniture. He even made a chair in his kitchen with a pad was reupholstered with human skin. This is one twisted puppy. Now, where you think, oh, wait a minute, so how did that influence Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, and Leatherface, right? Because that was never in any of those movies, was it? Except for Leatherface. No. His first victim, he made into a bodysuit where he would run outside and dance around under the moonlight where he wouldn't be able to see the stitching. And he had everything. He had breasts, fake, vagina, and he would pretend to be a woman. He would wear his shoes made of human skin. He would dress up. He even had pant legs made out of human skin so that it would cover his hair. Yeah. So it's not really, it always makes you wonder what makes these guys tick, Like, what would make him decide, I'm going to make a human suit and I'm going to be a cross-dresser? Not to mention, when they opened up the guy's fridge, they found a ton of just body parts and meat and organs and stuff, all stored like food. So it's said to be that he was a cannibal as well. But mostly he was a grave robber and a murderer of 2 women. And his brother. But he would never admit to it. In my opinion, it's crazy to think how people like this become so notarized and so just like the most popular thing in American culture is what? Horror movies, of course, right? Who doesn't love a horror movie? Now, the thing that gets me the most is that how come he had such an influence? Was it because of the time? Was it because of how heinous and how disgusting and how distraught his crimes were? How perverse? I mean, you're thinking this is the 50s, late 40s, okay, early 50s when this guy got caught. You know, and this was not, you know, the influence of a madman who watched scary movies or who looked at, you know, lewd material or, you know, seen these things on a daily basis. These were farm boys who were sheltered with a mother who was insanely Lutheran. Her main objective in life was making sure that her boys grew up to not be womanizers, to not be drunks, and to be men of God. So what could have possibly made him snap? When he finally went to court, the court had deemed that he was unfit for trial due to insanity, which is blatantly obvious. But 10 years later, left him in a courtroom pleading out to murder. And he was sent back to a psychiatric hospital where he spent the end of his days. And he finally died of lung and liver failure. I believe it's lung failure as well. I know liver failure. But what made him tick? What made him snap? You know? Why was he the most popular killer? Because you never really hear too much about killers that have influenced other movies. Except for Gacy, maybe Bundy. What made him tick? What got him to act this way? His father was a complete pacifist. His mother was in the church. You never know. You never know. But he had a huge impact on horror movie culture. Like I said, Psycho, which is the story of Norman Bates and his mummy. And Norman runs a hotel for his mother. And he begins to start murdering people into his hotel and dressing like a woman while he does it, and blames it on his mother. And then you have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is just a backwoods family of complete psychopaths. I mean, it's not like, you know, the facts of life or anything, or, you know, Family Matters, but it's influenced by Ed Gien. You know, you walk in and there's taxidermy and there's skin lamps, and I mean, his apron was made of human, his face was made of human. So I mean, in direct relation, this is one of the, you know, more intense slasher flicks at the time. You know, and just like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, where he's making a human suit so he could be a cross-dresser because he was denied the ability to, you know, say he wasn't insane and wanted to get. He wasn't actually gay or crazy. He just wanted to make a suit and be a woman. Well, it was said in the movie. So who could it be that Ed Gein was originally, that he wasn't gay? Obviously, he was hanging out with that first victim of his. But he killed her. He loved his mother. He was a mommy's boy. You never know what will make these people snap. But I think it's crazy how nowadays people will blame movies, media, things like that nature, you know. But where was it then? You know, why did he have these thoughts? Why did he do what he did? You know, it's not intrigues me what the crime is. It intrigues me because of, you know, what's the behind the scenes thought in these guys' minds that makes them finally do what they do and act and work for so long. Well, that's about enough for today. I hope you enjoyed this story. Make sure that you subscribe if you want to see any more of these gruesome tales. And make sure that you stay tuned, because next week we'll be talking about paranormal cases that Ed and Lorraine Warren dealt with in the movies that they inspired. And we're not just talking the newer ones. There's an older one. If you know, stay tuned or write it in the comment section below.